Good morning, MacLaren. For those of you who don't know me or remember me, my name is Mr. Berntson. My last time doing this, I talked about the Gevla goat that those pesky Swedes kept burning down in northern Sweden. Today, though, we're transitioning to continental Europe, and we're talking about a poet whose name is Rainer Maria Rilke. He was an Austrian and Bohemian poet. We'll talk about his life in a second. And then we're going to read a poem from him in the German. For those of you who don't know, I teach German here at MacLaren. And then we're going to, I'll read you my own personal translation in English. And then we'll talk a little bit about what translating poetry looks like, right? And some of the techniques, some of the different things I personally put into this translation. So I had a lot of fun doing this. I really hope you guys enjoy it. And without further ado, let's introduce our friend Rilke. So today we're going to be reading a poem from Rilke's poetry collection, which he titled Sonnets to Orpheus. And this particular poem is technically untitled, but it's poem 21 from book 2. And it is often titled Spring Has Come Again or Spring Is Come Again. But first, let's talk about who Rilke was. So Rilke was a poet and writer who lived during the turn of the century, from the 19th to the 20th century. He lived most of his life in Austria, although he traveled greatly around Europe. He went all over the place. He lived in France, in Germany, in Bohemia. And so he was an avid traveler. He loved to travel, and his travels inspired a lot of his future poetry. Now, Rilke was a very troubled man. A lot of his writings and poetry have to do with these sort of dark nights of the soul that Rilke went through. But his prose is considered really some of the most eloquent and beautiful German language prose. And today it's recognized, he's recognized as one of America's favorite European poets, right? So he's very world renowned. The reason that Rilke was such an interesting poet is because his works kind of spanned his works kind of span all of these different movements in European literature, right? And so many people consider him a bridge between more traditional poetry and more modern poetry, right? And a lot of different themes from various German literature epochs, right? Like German classicism and German romanticism can be seen in his poetry, right? He was a lover of the classics himself. He read the classics like you guys, and obviously Sonnets to Orpheus, right? He's alluding to a classical story in this case. And so he wasn't too far off from you guys getting your great education with the classics. And so Rilke was a deeply romantic person, right? And he loved romantic poetry, and oftentimes romantic poetry has to do with nature, right? And what romanticism loves to do is personify nature, right? And this thread of the personification of nature, right? And what is called metonymy, which is taking an idea and having it throughout all of his poems kind of represent something, or taking a symbol and having it represent an idea. So for example, in a lot of Rilke's poems, he uses roses as a symbol of sleep, right? It's a metaphor for sleep, right? Because the rose petals represent fluttering eyelids, right? And so Rilke was a deep lover of nature, and that shines through in a lot of his poetry. Here's a picture of Rilke. He only lived to be 51 years old, so not super old. He died of leukemia, but he went on to be really one of the more beloved poems in both Europe and poets in both Europe and America. So without further ado, I'm going to read Spring Is Come Again, which is in his Sonnets to Orpheus, a collection of 55 poems. Frühling ist wieder gekommen. Die Erde ist wie ein Kind, das Gedichte weiß. Viele, oh viele, für die Beschwerde langen Lernens bekommt sie den Preis. Streng war Lehrer, vermuckten das Weiße an den Barte des alten Manns. Nun, wie das Grüne, das Blaue heiße, dürfen wir fragen. Sie kann's. Erde, die Freiheit, du Glücklicher, spiele nun mit den Kindern. Wir wollen dich fangen, fröhliche Erde, dem Frosten gelingt's. Oh, was der Lehrer sie lehrte, das viele und was gedruckt steht in Berntson und langen, schwierigen Stammen, sie singst. So I'm guessing most of you didn't understand any of that, although I'm sure there's some students and staff, obviously my German students, who have some practice in the language and some staff too. But fortunately, I've translated it, so you guys will get to listen to the English as well, or my version of the English, right? Remember, it's not a word for word translation. It's not a literal verbatim translation, but it's a poetic translation, right? And so what I aimed to do in my poem was to show the meaning, right? To show the meaning, to show kind of the underlying flow, rather than just word for word translated. And I'll talk about that after I read my English version. Spring is come again. The earth like a child, one who knows her poems by heart. Many, so many poems, and for her steadfast labor, grasping her prize at last. Her teacher was old Severity. We loved the white beard on that elderly man. Now may we ask the names of the blue and the green, and the earth will know them. She can recite them all. Serendipitous soil, you are free. Play tag with us, for we are children too. We want to catch you, O sunny, sublime soil. The happiest of us will do so. Oh, that which Mr. Winter taught her, all that bounty was ever printed on her roots and twisted stems. This bounty now she sings. Not many of you can read German, I'm assuming, but Rilke's poem is very, very poetic, right? The prose is not technically, grammatically correct, right? He's taking lots of liberties. It's very lyrical, right? He's taking lots of liberties with the German prose. So some of these things you can see, right? She sings, right? Looks like that, but it's actually a contraction where it's saying she sings it, right? Or she sings them. And so there's all sorts of things like that happening, which isn't super normal in German language, right? But it's very, very poetic. I want to talk about sort of what I did when it comes to these two poems, which was take an extended metaphor, which may be more obvious in German, and kind of make it more obvious to the English speaker, right, to the English listener. And so as you see, right, we have two names for her teacher, right, Old Severity and Mr. Winter, right? And so in this part of the poem, in this stanza, right, we have this streng war Lehrer, right, which literally means stern or severe was her teacher, right, or her teacher was stern or severe, right? But I translated it as an actual name, right? I gave this man, this teacher a name, right? And this happens in the next part of the stanza where Rilke says, "Vermochten das Weiße an den Barte des alten Manns," right? In English, this would be, we liked the white on the beard of that old man, right? And so we're reading, right? And we understand the white on the beard. Well, who's she talking about? Well, who was the teacher of Spring? other than winter, right? Winter was the teacher of spring. Winter is personified as this old man, this old teacher with this white beard that they all liked, right? Yeah, he was stern. Yes, he was severe, right? But they liked him, right? And so eventually we come down to this stanza at the end, right? Oh, what the teacher taught her, right? Oh, what the teacher taught her. Oh, that which Mr. Winter, our teacher, taught her. And so I decided, right, to go, because this is a very playful poem, right? It's a personification of Earth as a child, right? And it's also, in this stanza, we get this beckoning, right? This call to play with them, right? To play with the kids, right? Who are the kids? Well, it's us, right? The happiest of us will do so, right? We'll catch you. And so there's this idea that we are children too, right? And that you are a child and you're free and you can play, right? And so here it says, Spiele nun mit den Kindern, right? Play now with the children, right? But I said play tag, right? This might not translate directly into German as well, but we all understand this game, right? We all grew up playing tag, right? We all know what I mean when I say that, right? And so that helps us kind of understand this next line, we want to catch you, right? And so there's the thing about translation, especially with poems, is that one way to think about it is that every translator is also an interpreter, right? And so the poem literally that Rilke wrote, whenever anyone reads it, whenever anyone listens to it, right, they take their own meaning from it, right? They take their own understanding, their own interpretation, right? They see things in it maybe that others don't, right? They understand some metaphors, right? They understand things that maybe others don't see as well, right? And so, you know, what stuck out to me, what really struck me was this teacher relationship, right? The teacher and the student, right? And, you know, of course, Rilke loved using extended metaphors, right? A metaphor throughout all his poems. It starts off as a child, right? The earth is a child who knows her poems by heart, right? Of course, in German, we have literal genders for normally non-gender nouns in English. For example, the earth, right? The earth is die Welt or die Erde, right? And it actually takes on a feminine article, right? But in English, we do this sometimes as well, right? We talk about certain things in the feminine, right? And oftentimes we do this for the earth, right? We talk about it as her, right? With America, right? Her, from sea to shining sea, right? Her, oh, beautiful. Okay, you know what I mean, right? And so this is happening, right? This happens in German naturally in the language, but I decided to keep this idea, right? To refer to the earth as a child as her rather than it, right? Kind of makes it more immediate, more present, right? It's a her. And of course she knows her poem by heart. And at the end, right? All of that Mr. Winter taught her, right? All of this bounty, all of this stuff that was there all along, right, was printed. Boom, right? She understood it, she memorized it. And it's of this bounty now that she sings. And so this is a bit of a, I don't want to lecture you guys, right? But it goes to show how memorizing things, right? Memorizing poetry is very important. And it can help you understand things more, right? And I also wanted to say this because I know there's probably snow on the ground right now. There's definitely snow outside right now. I can see it out my window. It doesn't really look like spring, but it's coming, right? So let this poem kind of be in your heart as spring comes, because it's a very beautiful poem, right? And so think about this poem and anticipate spring, and hopefully we'll make it through this tough winter, right? Okay, thanks, MacLaren. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.